Who truly cares about your struggles? Your ambitions? Your pain? We live believing the world watches us closely, but the truth is far more sobering: nobody really cares. Not in the way you think they do. And that is the most liberating realization you will ever have. When you accept that no one is invested in your failures or your victories as deeply as you are, you stop performing for the crowd, and you begin living for yourself. This is not about bitterness. It's about freedom. Stoicism, the ancient philosophy of Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus, teaches us to turn inward, to focus on what is within our control, and to let go of the illusions of constant judgment. In this video, we're diving deep into why nobody cares is not a curse, but a powerful gift. We'll explore how Stoic wisdom can guide you away from the trap of external validation, towards a life of clarity, resilience, and self-mastery. If you've been living for likes, for applause, for the approval of people who barely know you, stay until the end. This might be the wake-up call you didn't know you needed. The illusion of attention. I used to believe the world was always watching me. Every mistake I made felt like it was under a giant spotlight. If I said the wrong thing in a meeting, I was sure people carried it with them for weeks. If I stumbled in a relationship, I thought everyone around me judged me for it. Maybe you felt that too. That quiet, heavy pressure, like you're walking on stage every moment of your life, and the audience is holding a scorecard. But let me tell you a truth I wish I had learned earlier: most people aren't watching you as closely as you think. They're too busy watching themselves. Think about it. When was the last time you replayed in your mind a small mistake someone else made years ago? A coworker who mispronounced a word. A neighbor who wore mismatched shoes to church. A friend who forgot your birthday one time. You probably forgot those moments quickly. Not because you didn't care at the time, but because life moved on, yours and theirs. And yet, when it comes to our own slip-ups, we hold on for dear life. We replay the scene at night before we sleep, as if the whole world is still talking about it. This is what I call the illusion of attention. It tricks us into thinking we are the center of everyone's story, when really, we are just passing through their day. Let me give you an example. I remember once, years ago, I spilled coffee all over my shirt right before giving a presentation. I was mortified. Standing there, fumbling with paper towels, I was certain people would never forget that moment. But later, when I mentioned it to a colleague, he looked at me with surprise. He said, "I don't even remember that. I was too nervous about my own part." That's when it hit me: we spend so much energy worrying about being judged, while everyone else is worrying about the exact same thing. The Stoics understood this well. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." Isn't that the truth? We crave approval, yet in reality, others are too consumed with their own lives to carry our burdens for long. When you begin to see through this illusion, you start to breathe easier. You start to realize you don't need to perform all the time. You don't need to be perfect in every step. Because the audience you fear so much, they're not even watching. And here's the gift in that: if nobody is paying that much attention, you are free. Free to try something new. Free to fail and learn. Free to live without the constant weight of judgment. So the next time you feel eyes on you, remember those eyes are probably looking inward, worrying about their own mistakes, their own insecurities. Not yours. This lesson, simple as it sounds, opens the door to something greater. Because once you see that nobody is really keeping score, you stop chasing their applause. And when you stop chasing their applause, you begin searching for something deeper, the kind of worth that comes from within. That's where we're heading next. Not the empty comfort of being noticed, but the lasting strength of knowing your own value. Freedom in realizing nobody cares. In the last lesson, we uncovered a truth: that people aren't paying as much attention to you as you once believed. They're wrapped up in their own struggles, their own stories. Now, here comes the part that might surprise you. That realization that nobody really cares isn't something to fear. It's something to celebrate. Because in it, you find freedom. Think back to when you were younger. Maybe it was high school. Do you remember how every little thing felt like it mattered? The clothes you wore, the way your hair looked, whether you said the right thing in the cafeteria. You carried the weight of being noticed, and it shaped how you walked through the halls. But as the years went by, you learned something. Nobody remembers those little things. What felt like the end of the world at 16, was nothing more than a passing moment for everyone else. That same lesson applies now, no matter your age. Nobody is holding your life under a microscope. And that gives you permission to finally live without fear. Let me share a story. I knew a man in his 50s who always wanted to learn guitar. But he told me he was embarrassed to start. He said, "What will people think?" A grown man fumbling with beginner chords. So for years, he did nothing. Then one day, after a long illness, he realized life is too short to worry about the opinions of strangers. He picked up the guitar. And you know what happened? Nobody laughed. Most people didn't notice. And the few who did, they admired his courage. The fear of being judged kept him from joy for decades. But the moment he accepted that nobody really cared, he was free to pursue what mattered to him. This is the power of Stoic thinking. Seneca said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." We invent critics in our minds, but those critics rarely exist in the real world. By letting go of them, you reclaim your life. Imagine what that freedom could mean for you. Maybe it's starting a business you've always dreamed about. Maybe it's going back to school, or painting, or traveling, or simply speaking your mind with honesty instead of fear. When you understand that others are too focused on their own paths, you stop wasting energy trying to please them. You stop performing, and you start living. And here's the beautiful twist: when you live freely, you inspire others to do the same. Your courage becomes a quiet permission slip for those around you. So don't see the phrase "nobody cares" as a wound. See it as a doorway. A doorway to freedom. A doorway to authenticity. A doorway to a life where you are no longer chained by invisible critics. Now, once you step through that doorway, the question becomes, if you're no longer chasing the approval of others, where do you find your sense of worth? That's the path we'll walk next. Because the Stoics remind us, true worth doesn't come from applause. It comes from within. The trap of external validation. In the last lesson, we talked about freedom, that beautiful moment when you realize nobody really cares, and suddenly you are free to live your own life. But here's the challenge: even when we know this truth, many of us still fall into a dangerous trap. The trap of chasing approval. The trap of external validation. Let's be honest. It feels good when people notice us. When someone compliments your work. When your children say they're proud. When your boss gives you recognition. That approval feels warm, almost addictive. It tells us, yes, you matter. Yes, you're doing well. But here's the problem. When you start depending on that approval, you hand over your happiness to someone else. I'll give you an example. A friend of mine worked in sales for most of his life. He was excellent, always top of the charts, always winning awards. But one year, his numbers slipped. Not by much, but enough that the recognition stopped coming. No more trophies, no more applause at company meetings. And I remember him saying to me, "I feel invisible. Like I don't exist anymore." That's the trap. When your sense of worth is tied to applause, the silence feels unbearable. The Stoics warned us about this. Epictetus taught, if you are ever tempted to look for outside approval, know that you have given your peace of mind to others. He understood that validation from the outside world is fragile. It comes and goes, often for reasons beyond your control. Think about social media today. One day you post a picture, and the likes flood in. You feel seen, appreciated, maybe even admired. The next day, you post something else, silence. And suddenly, doubt creeps in. Did I do something wrong? Am I less interesting? Do I still matter? But nothing has changed except the crowd's attention. You are the same person you were yesterday. Yet because you've tied your worth to their reaction, your peace rises and falls with every click of a button. Living like that is exhausting. It's like being a leaf blown around by the wind. No stability, no anchor. The Stoics invite us to build a different foundation. One that doesn't move with every cheer or every silence. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, it is not the opinion of others that defines you, but the integrity of your own soul. Your worth isn't measured in applause. It's measured in character. In how you treat others. In whether you live with honesty, courage, and virtue. So ask yourself, are you chasing approval, or are you building character? When you stop needing the world to clap for you, you begin to hear a quieter voice, your own. And that voice matters more than any applause could. External validation is a trap because it keeps you looking outward. Freedom, real freedom, comes when you look inward. When you anchor yourself in values, not opinions. In principles, not popularity. And once you begin living this way, something shifts. You discover a steadiness, a kind of calm resilience. Your life stops being a performance, and starts becoming your own. Now, this doesn't mean the journey is easy. The temptation for approval is strong, and the noise of the world is loud. But if you can step back, if you can remember that external validation is fleeting, you'll begin to see a new way of living, a way rooted in what you can actually control. And that is exactly where we'll go next. Because the Stoics remind us, the path to peace is found in focusing on what is truly ours to command. Focus on your sphere of control. In the last lesson, we uncovered the trap of external validation, how dangerous it is to hand your peace over to the applause of others. So the natural question is, if I can't control what people think of me, if I can't build my life on their opinions, then what can I control? This is where the Stoics give us one of their most powerful teachings: focus only on what lies within your sphere of control. It sounds simple, almost too simple. But think about how much of our energy is wasted on things outside of us. The weather, the economy, politics, the choices our children make as they grow older, the way strangers treat us in traffic. We can spend hours, days, even years, worrying, complaining, replaying these things in our minds. And yet no amount of worry changes them. They remain stubbornly outside our grasp. Epictetus said it plainly, some things are up to us, and some are not. That's the dividing line. Your thoughts, your choices, your actions, those belong to you. Everything else, temporary guests in your life, beyond your command. Let me share a story. I once knew a woman who spent decades angry at her brother. They had fallen out after an argument, and for years, she replayed the conversation in her head. She wished he would call, wished he would apologize, wished the past could be different. But he never did. And the years passed. One day, she told me with tears in her eyes, I wasted half my life waiting for him to change, when the only thing I ever had power over was myself. That's the heart of it. When you spend your days trying to control what isn't yours, you lose the chance to shape what is. But when you accept the boundary, when you release what is not yours, and focus on what is, a new kind of peace enters your life. You may not control the economy, but you control how wisely you spend and save. You may not control your children's choices, but you control how you love them, how you listen, how you stand as an example. You may not control the weather, but you control whether you carry an umbrella, and more importantly, your attitude when it rains. It's not about indifference. It's about clarity. It's about knowing where your effort matters. The Stoics believed this clarity is the foundation of freedom. Because when you stop fighting battles you cannot win, you gain strength for the ones you can. When you stop trying to bend the world, you finally begin to shape yourself. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself every morning, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Strength. That's the gift of focusing on your sphere of control. Not the illusion of power over others, but the steady reality of power over yourself. So, ask yourself today, where am I wasting energy on what I can't change? And what could happen if I redirected that energy inward, to what is truly mine? The answer may surprise you. It may feel like the world itself becomes lighter. Not because it changed, but because you finally stopped trying to hold it all in your hands. And that brings us to the final truth in this journey: when you focus on your sphere of control, life becomes less about the noise outside, and more about the discipline within. And discipline, the Stoics remind us, is the path to real peace. Inner courage over outer praise. In the last lesson, we talked about your sphere of control, how peace comes when you stop fighting battles outside your reach and start tending to what is truly yours. But here's the next challenge: once you know what you can control, how do you find the strength to live by it, especially when the world doesn't cheer for you? This is where the Stoics invite us to build inner courage instead of chasing outer praise. Because let's be honest, we live in a world that rewards applause. Workplaces celebrate the loudest voices. Social media celebrates the most likes. Even in families, there's often a quiet competition for recognition, for being noticed. And yet, when you reach a certain age, you start to see how hollow that applause can be. It fades quickly. It doesn't always go to the most deserving. And sometimes, the very things worth doing, the things that matter most, are the things nobody ever sees. Think about raising a child. The sleepless nights, the sacrifices, the 1,000 small choices made in love. There are no trophies for that. No stage, no standing ovation. But does that make it less valuable? Of course not. In fact, it may be the most courageous work of all. Or think about choosing integrity at work. Maybe you refuse to cut corners, even though others do. Maybe you turn down an easy profit, because you know it isn't honest. You won't get a headline for that decision. No applause. But in that moment, you've built something stronger than praise. You've built character. The Stoics understood this deeply. Seneca wrote, "I judge you unfortunate because you have never lived through misfortune. You have passed through life without an opponent. No one can ever know what you are capable of, not even you." What he meant was this: courage isn't proven in applause. It's proven in the quiet, often unseen struggles, where you choose principle over comfort. Let me share a story. A man I knew in his 60s once told me he regretted spending so much of his life trying to please his boss. He worked late, gave up time with his family, all for the nod of approval at the office. And now, years later, that praise means nothing. The boss is gone, the company has moved on. But the missed moments with his children, those cannot be reclaimed. Outer praise is fleeting. Inner courage lasts. When you act with courage, when you choose honesty over convenience, kindness over indifference, discipline over ease, you carry that with you. It becomes part of who you are. And no one can take it away. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, the approval of others is a poor standard. Be content if you act in accordance with nature. In other words, if you live with courage and virtue, you have already won, whether or not the crowd is watching. So today, ask yourself, am I living for applause that will fade tomorrow? Or am I building a courage that will stay with me for life? Because the truth is, the most meaningful victories often happen in silence. And that silence is not empty, it is full of strength. And this leads us into our final reflection. If courage matters more than praise, then what is the ultimate goal of the Stoic life? What are we moving toward when we let go of illusions, of applause, of control? That's where we'll go next, to the heart of it all, finding peace not in the noise of the world, but in the stillness within. Vulnerability without fear. In our last reflection, we spoke about inner courage, how the true measure of a life well lived is not in the applause of others, but in the strength of your own character. But there's another kind of courage the Stoics invite us to embrace. Not the loud, heroic kind. Not the kind celebrated in movies or newspapers. But the quiet, deeply human courage of allowing yourself to be vulnerable without fear. For many of us, especially as we grow older, vulnerability feels like weakness. We've been taught to keep a strong face, to hide our wounds, to tough it out. We tell ourselves, if I don't show pain, I can't be hurt. If I don't show need, I can't be rejected. But let me ask you this, has hiding ever truly protected you? Or has it only built walls between you and the people you love? I remember a man I once met at a support group. He had lost his wife after 40 years of marriage. For months, he kept the pain to himself. He stayed busy, smiled at work, told everyone he was fine. But inside, he was drowning. Only when he finally spoke his grief out loud to friends, to his children, even to strangers, did the healing begin. His vulnerability didn't make him weaker. It made him more human. And it allowed others to step closer, to carry the weight with him. The Stoics understood this paradox. Seneca wrote, "What need is there to weep over parts of life? The whole of it calls for tears." He wasn't saying life is hopeless. He was saying it is natural to feel sorrow, to hurt, to long, to struggle. Pretending otherwise is not strength. Strength is the ability to face reality openly, without being crushed by it. Think about the relationships in your own life. Which ones feel most real? Are they the ones where you kept your guard up, always trying to look perfect? Or are they the ones where you allowed yourself to be seen, flaws, fears, and all? Vulnerability is not weakness. It is an act of trust. It says, I believe our connection is stronger than my fear. It says, I am willing to be seen as I am, not as I pretend to be. And here's the truth, when you live without fear of being vulnerable, you unlock a new kind of freedom. You stop wasting energy maintaining the mask. You stop fearing rejection, because you know you showed up honestly. And you start to discover deeper, more meaningful bonds with the people around you. Marcus Aurelius, who carried the weight of an empire, still admitted his own fragility in his journals. He confessed his frustrations, his doubts, his fatigue. And in that honesty, we see not just a ruler, but a man, human, imperfect, relatable. His vulnerability is part of what makes his wisdom endure. So ask yourself, where am I hiding? Where am I pretending to be stronger than I feel? And what would happen if, just once, I allowed someone to see me as I truly am? Because that, too, is Stoic courage. Not the absence of pain, but the refusal to fear it. Not the denial of weakness, but the strength to embrace it openly. And this leads us naturally to our final step. Because when you learn to live with courage, and when you are no longer afraid of vulnerability, you begin to taste the rarest gift of all, a quiet, steady stillness within. Resilience through indifference. In the last lesson, we explored vulnerability, the quiet courage of showing up as you are, without fear of being seen. Now, the Stoics lead us one step further. They teach us a kind of resilience that grows not from hardness, but from indifference. Not indifference in the cold, uncaring sense, but indifference in the wise, steady sense, the ability to remain unmoved by the things that do not truly matter. Think for a moment about how much of life is noise. The passing opinions of strangers. The daily frustrations, traffic, long lines, bad weather. The gossip at work, the endless churn of the news cycle. These things stir us up, waste our energy, make us feel constantly unsettled. And yet, if you pause, you realize most of it is outside your control. Most of it will not matter a year from now, perhaps not even a week from now. The Stoics called these things indifference. Not because they are meaningless, but because they lie outside the core of what makes a good life. Health, wealth, reputation, they may be pleasant or painful, but they do not define your character. They do not touch your inner freedom. I once knew a man who lost his job in his 50s. It was sudden, unfair, and humiliating. For weeks, he replayed the moment in his head, the words his boss used, the way co-workers avoided eye contact. He felt destroyed. But slowly, with time, he began to see differently. The job was gone. But his integrity, his work ethic, his love for his family, those remained. And with that realization, he found the strength to start over. What once felt like the end of everything became simply another change of circumstance. His resilience was born the moment he became indifferent to what was never fully in his hands. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are pained by external things, it is not they that disturb you, but your judgment of them. And it is in your power to wipe out that judgment now." That is resilience through indifference. The storm may rage outside, but inside, you remain calm. Not because you deny reality, but because you refuse to give it more power than it deserves. This is not about becoming numb. It is about becoming wise. It is about learning to distinguish between what deserves your heart and what deserves only a passing glance. So ask yourself, how much of my day is lost to things that do not truly matter? How often do I surrender my peace to the opinion of someone I may never see again? Imagine instead living with this quiet resilience. Imagine hearing praise and criticism alike, and greeting both with a calm smile. Imagine setbacks arriving, and instead of breaking you, they simply bend you, like wind through a strong tree. This is what the Stoics meant by indifference. Not coldness, but strength. Not withdrawal, but clarity. The resilience to stand firm no matter what the world throws at you. And this leads us to the heart of our journey. Because when you learn resilience through indifference, you stop being tossed by every wave. You begin to find something deeper, a stillness that is not touched by fortune or misfortune. That stillness is where the Stoic path finally leads. And it is there, in that quiet center, that true peace is found. Focusing on your own path. In our last reflection, we talked about resilience through indifference, the strength to remain steady when life throws distractions, noise, and storms your way. But resilience is not only about enduring what comes. It is also about choosing where you place your energy. And that brings us here, the Stoic wisdom of focusing on your own path. Because here's the truth, so much suffering in life comes not from our own journey, but from constantly looking sideways. We compare ourselves to neighbors, to co-workers, to people we see on television or online. We measure our progress against theirs, our worth against their success. And yet, as Epictetus said, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. In other words, stop looking at what others think, and start paying attention to your own steps. Let me share a story. A woman in her 40s once told me that she spent years feeling behind. Her friends had bigger houses, took vacations she couldn't afford, drove cars that looked newer. She pushed herself to keep up, but the more she chased, the emptier she felt. Then one day, after an exhausting year of overwork, she asked herself a simple question: what do I actually want? Not what her friends wanted. Not what society expected. But her. And the answer surprised her. She didn't want the big house. She wanted time with her children, time for her art, time to breathe. Once she stopped measuring her path against others, she finally began to live her own life. The Stoics remind us, the only path that matters is the one beneath your feet. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "It is not the actions of others which trouble us, but our own judgments about them." Remove those judgments, and you walk freely. Think about how freeing that is. You don't need to win someone else's race. You don't need to follow someone else's map. Your life has its own terrain, its own seasons, its own rhythm. Of course, the world will try to pull you off your path. Advertisements will tell you what you should want. Family or friends may question your choices. Doubts may whisper that you're falling behind. But every time you return to your path, you reclaim your peace. This doesn't mean shutting out the world. It means walking with clarity. It means saying, I will admire your journey, but I will not confuse it with mine. It means asking yourself each day, am I living in alignment with my values, or am I just copying the crowd? And here's the gift: when you focus on your own path, comparison fades. Jealousy fades. The noise grows quiet. And what's left is a steady rhythm of life that feels honest, that feels yours. So pause for a moment and ask yourself, what is truly mine to do? What small step can I take today that belongs to me, not to the expectations of others? Because in the end, peace does not come from outrunning everyone else. It comes from walking your path with steadiness and truth. And as we arrive at the close of this journey, this is where all the lessons converge. The illusions of attention. The freedom of knowing nobody cares. The courage of vulnerability. The resilience of indifference. They all point to this: your life is yours to walk. Your path is enough. And in that quiet truth, you will find the stillness you have been seeking all along. So let the truth liberate you. Nobody cares. And because nobody cares, you are free to live by your values, to pursue what matters, to rise and fall and rise again without the burden of constant judgment. The only approval you ever truly needed was your own. Thank you for walking through this reflection with me today. If this message spoke to you, share it with someone who's trapped by the weight of others' opinions. And don't forget to subscribe, so together we can keep uncovering the timeless wisdom of Stoicism. Stay with your path. Focus on your life. Live with virtue. Until next time, remember, nobody cares. And that is your power.